Welcome to LDS Faith in Crisis. This is your host, The Birds. I'm Alexis.
I'm Theron.
And we are so glad you're here. We're so glad you're here. We're going to start off with the question, and I'm very excited about this one. The question is, did Joseph Smith practice witchcraft? Oh,
what a great question.
So let's just dive right in, Dad.
Nice.
Did Joseph Smith practice witchcraft?
So, first of all, you have to understand what is witchcraft, right?
Agreed.
So, I've done an in-depth study of witchcraft, Wicca, paganism, and the rites associated with how they invoke. It's a very interesting topic, actually, right?
Okay.
And I think you know some about that as well. Now, the idea would then be is, you had a comment there for a moment?
Yeah, I was going to say pause for a second because I feel like we need to define. Like,
Sure.
we need to start with definitions. Like,
Yep.
let's have you define for myself and our audience. We'll make sure we're on the same page about what is witchcraft.
So, witchcraft is the use of spells or rituals to invoke the power of an entity to change reality in the world.
That was a beautiful definition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I can agree. So it's really just using ritual, which I would define ritual as patterns of behavior with symbolic intention.
Yeah.
So symbolism, a pattern, some sort of rite, some sort of like intentional pattern of behavior that's seeking a certain outcome.
So just to give the reader or the listener an understanding what a ritual spell is, you have all performed them. You all have. And a perfect example of a ritual spell is when an individual has a birthday party and they set up a cake and they put candles on that cake and they light that cake, and then they are told explicitly to seek something that they desire. Their intent, I want this to happen. And then they are to blow the candles out and release the desire. That is a ritual
Okay, can we just
spell.
pause there for a second? Because that's so funny.
Mm-hmm.
So, I need to tell the audience a side story. So, growing up, my dad would tell me almost every birthday that my birthday candles were, well, it was like this is his most classic example of rituals that we do that people don't know we're doing them.
You don't even know you're doing them.
He has a whole list of
do.
like rituals that he sees in like modern day of things that are witchcraft like esque, that are like modern. I don't know what they're modern. They're modernized, like the birthday candles.
Yeah, they're traditions.
They're traditions. Now, like, most of us are not actually performing some sort of, like, witchcraft rite every time we blow out our candles, okay? So, because we don't have the intention, nor do we have, like, any desire necessarily. But if you're, like, going through and you are seeking from a divine source to have them bring into your life in the coming year something specific, and you're thinking about it like some sort of divine entity, and you blow out your candles in a ritualistic fashion, then maybe we're practicing witchcraft, Dad. But like, just generally speaking, just so everyone's clear, every time you blow out your candles thus far in your life, you've not been like performing witchcraft.
That's correct. And one of the things I was going to point out after giving that example to individuals is just because you perform the ritual does not mean you have cast a spell.
Fair. Okay, so...
And that does actually apply. So one of the other things that's interesting, so we've defined what witchcraft is, and we find the basic principles of witchcraft. There's another one, which is the rule of three, which everyone should know if you're understanding witchcraft. You know, that which you send out returns unto you again, and that which is evil returns threefold. It's a threefold law. So if you send out good and attempting to change the world in a good way, then you can have good return to you again. But if you attempt to do something evil with this power, it will return to you in a threefold negative way. And that's also something for people to understand.
But karma in threefold is basically what you're talking about. So
correct.
these are rules of like true witchcraft is what you're basically telling us.
And there are other rules about how a true witch does their conjuring. So
right, we're not here to teach witchcraft.
No, I understand that, but one of the things that you do need to understand is that without an understanding of those certain rituals and practices, how can you say that Joseph Smith did or did not do that?
Well, I can.
Good. Go for it.
Because I feel like one of the things that you're doing when you are participating in witchcraft is involving unseen powers.
Sure.
I also feel like a lot of what Joseph Smith was doing in the early days of the church has shared techniques to some of the ritualistic patterns of witchcraft. So, like, a lot of lore around rocks and stones, for example, it has some shared history with early church history with the Urim and Thummim, and also with Seer stones. If just to preface for our audience, some of the behaviors that Joseph Smith often gets targeted as being participating in witchcraft for, especially by just like general Christianity, include translating.
Okay. For a minute there, your camera was frozen. We could hear your voice though, so that was important.
Okay, great. But I'm just going to give some examples of areas where Joseph Smith is sometimes pinpointed as participating in witchcraft, some of his behaviors that seem witchy-ish. One of them is like using the seer stone inside of a hat and looking at the seer stone and seeing the translated characters on the stone without ever touching the plates. So he would, to clarify for our listeners, if you're not aware, Joseph Smith didn't actually read the plates when he was translating the Book of Mormon. In fact, he didn't even have to have the plates open. They could be wrapped up in a cloth and he would still translate them by looking into his hat with a seer stone in the bottom. He would look down into the stone and see the characters or have them in his mind of what the scriptures would say, and so he would read them word for word that way. That's how he translated, which is sometimes just super bizarre to us modern church members. We're like, what on earth is happening here? Other examples would be like he used a different seer stone to find the plates originally when he went looking for them, and for other things.
Well, so can I block you there for just one moment? So the use of the seer stone for the revelatory purpose of translation is different for finding a location or what have you. And he didn't really use the seer stones for the finding of the location of the plates. That was given to him via revelation and vision.
No. Sorry, I didn't mean the plate specifically. I meant other treasure.
Yeah.
I know that he had somebody else's seer stone that he was using to find buried treasure, which is what he gets like a lot of hate for.
Sure.
I also, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure he used like a divining rod or like a wishbone kind of thing.
Actually, that's called a rodsman.
Okay.
And so Joseph Smith had that capacity, but the one who was really good at it was Oliver Cowdery, just so you know. Sure.
But moral of the story, I mean, these guys were using stones and rocks and in bizarre ways, and they were translating things.
So
I'm
going to stop you right there, because the reason you think that they're bizarre is because you haven't understood the Old Testament.
Okay, pause there. I feel like that is a rabbit hole. So
before we go there, I just want to give you a list of things that you might want to look up. One of them is called the Breastplate of Judgment. And this is a breastplate that the priests would wear, and it had 12 stones on them, one for each letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and the stones would glow, and they would provide revelatory information to the priest. And so when they would ask to go and consult their gown, that's what they were talking about.
Yes, I'm aware of that. Our listeners probably are not.
And they also had
example.
Urim and Thummim, which was the same Urim and Thummim we had before. And they would also cast lots regularly for the divining of information. And another thing
pause.
Yes?
People might not know what it means to cast lots, so why don't you explain what that means?
So casting of lots was done usually in 3 different ways. Well, 2 different ways for sure. One of them, you'd have multiple different sticks of different length, and people would choose. But most of the time what they do is they would have You reach into a bag or whatever and draw a stone.
Okay, I still got to go back because our audience might not know what this means. If my understanding of casting lots is that you're trying to get an answer, answer to a question.
Yep.
So you have like great example is actually Nephi and his brothers.
Sure.
This is the example that comes to my mind when you say casting lots. So Nephi and his brothers were trying to decide who would go to get the plates of Laban,
Yep.
and they picked sticks.
Yep.
Essentially, they had 3 different stick sizes, and then they decided, okay, the one with the longest one is the one who is supposed to go get the plates.
Yep.
And so then they would each pick. Now, you're considering that divination.
It is a means by which you use a device for revelation.
How do we not know it's just random?
Well, God commanded them to use it. That's right in the D&C, right in the Old Testament. I have lists. I've studied this guy. So I have locations you can go to show where he was told use lots. And in fact,
Okay, let's just name off a few of them. We're not going to go through them, but just for our audience's sake.
18, 6 through 10, 1 Chronicles 24, 5, 31. Jonah 1, 7. Numbers 26, 55. There's a whole bunch of them.
Okay. We're going to keep moving on from that one.
So they had the ability
we don't want to get
use
sidetracked.
lots. Oh, and by the way, this is still in our D&C today, just so you know. The use of lots is in D&C section 102.12, just so you know. Look it up. It's cool.
Okay. So these are some interesting ways of getting revelation.
And it's using a device.
Using a device or using some sort of specific means.
Yes. Not just a thought placed in your mind, but actually using a device. Like remember Laban or Lehi was given a ball or director. God uses devices in some cases to provide revelation to us. A seer stone is one of them. Urim and Thummim is another. It's not unusual at all. In fact, it was common.
It's also not unusual for these same tools to be used in witchcraft.
But in different ways. And the reason why is Satan uses mimicry, right? So most everything that you have in a true principle, he will take that principle and twist it.
Sure. So how is one supposed to know whether Joseph Smith was using witchcraft or using God's tools?
Awesome.
Like, how do we know where the information's coming from? Because really, I mean, it's a good question, because Joseph Smith could have been told by God. I mean, God can do all things, right? And yet, we also know and have a great deal of evidence to suggest that so can the devil.
Sure, he surely can.
So, how do we know?
I like Moroni 7 for this one. The basic idea is how do you know what is true and what is good and what is right? Should I read that for us? It's in Moroni chapter 7.
Go for it, and then I'm sure I'll have more to say.
I'm sure you will, and that's okay. Moroni chapter 7, it says this, right here. Moroni chapter 7, verses 5 through 8, and then we're going to go a little bit more. It says, "For remember the word of God, which he saith, By their works you shall know them. For if their works are good, then they are good also. For behold, God saith, a man being evil cannot do that which is good. For if he offereth a gift or prayeth unto God, except he shall do it with real intent, it profiteth him nothing." So one way you can know if Joseph Smith was an actual prophet of the living God is what was the things that he did. That's the number one.
And there are I'll just say people have a lot of really solid arguments for reasons why some of the things that he did do were not good.
Yep.
So I feel like the conversation today could easily head towards the veracity of Joseph Smith.
Sure.
And I'm sure we'll get there at some point.
Well, but you also want to know, how do you know if something is evil and comes from the devil? And one of them is that it promotes you to do that which is evil. It will encourage you to do that which is not good.
I mean, like I said, though, some people argue that about Joseph Smith.
They do, sure. But then again, you have to understand, well, what is good, right? And another thing that is also another way of knowing if it's of the devil or which is God, in verse 13 of that same chapter, "But behold, that which is of God inviteth and enticeth to do good continually." Wherefore everything which inviteth and enticeth to do good, and to love God, and to serve him, is inspired of God. Those things which encourage us to do that which we have been commanded by God, to believe in Jesus as the Christ, to follow in his words, and to follow the way, those are ways in which we can know that something is good. Has to be both.
So that's definitely what the scriptures teach. I feel like we should have a conversation about what is good and what isn't.
We can.
Because I think it's going to be relevant to a lot of our discussions. And this question of how do we determine what's good and what's false or what's not good is, I mean, people say it's simple, but it's really not that simple. Like, obviously, if it were that simple, then we would be like, it would be easy to know what's like, we wouldn't be having crises of faith, period, if it was really that simple. So I think I just get really annoyed with people who are like, oh, it's just easy. We all have the light of Christ, and so we all just know what the right answer is. And it's like, no, because if you really look closely at any moral, complicated problem at all, then it really is not that simple. I mean, you just take, you brought up polygamy before.
Sure.
Just take polygamy as an example. I don't remember if that was earlier in this conversation necessarily, but polygamy is a great example, is basically what I'm saying. It's like, it's really not that simple. No. And another, I mean, I could give a bazillion different examples of, like, murder is also a great example. Sure. War is sometimes defended by God, and sometimes it's not. And it's like, murder and war are related, because if you're defining murder as intentionally killing somebody else, then war is very much classified under that. And yet there are times where we revere our defenders of faith and those people who are willing to fight for our freedom, and yet there are other times and circumstances where we say that that's just like the most evil abomination on the planet. Yeah. And so I'm just giving another paradox of an example of where, like, when you get down to the nitty-gritty of things, it's really not that simple. No. And that's why life is hard.
Well, I can give you some interesting examples in Christianity. When a Christian feels the Holy Ghost and has been given revelation, in an occult point of view, they have channeled a spirit and received information. When an individual, just saying, when an individual receives a covenant of baptism, they have been ritually murdered in a symbolic way and have been raised to a new life. I'm just telling you.
Okay, unfortunately, friends, I have heard this example before about the ritual murdering in comparison to baptism thing. Okay, so we're just going to, like, preface that we are spiritually...
Yeah, reborn.
We spiritually die.
Yep, we do.
I feel like murder is a little bit of a harsh word there.
So I'm just telling you that it's a matter of perspective.
There's still life-death process happening, right? Yep. So...
It's a matter of perspective. People will look at the things that Joseph Smith has done, and they can use a different perspective and say these things are clearly evil. And yet you look at that same behavior, that same activity, the same revelation with a different point of view and a different perspective, and you say clearly, he was a prophet, and this is revelation from God.
Well, I feel like this just heads right into the whole, how do you know truth at all?
Yeah.
And what's even the point? But, like, because some people will look at a question like this and they will literally say, like, well, it's just not even possible to know what's true, because, like, if truth is just simply dependent upon the perspective that you're looking at it, then is it even truth at all, right? If everything is just contradictory to each other and all is paradoxes, then is anything real, right? Like, we can get so far as to say that there is no such thing as truth at all so easily with basically the premise that of what you're describing, right? That, well, if you look at it from one point of view, then it's not true. If you look at it from another, it's true. Like your elephant analogy that you so dearly love. Mm-hmm. It's like, I love that analogy, but I also hate it because you can simultaneously easily argue that everything is true and therefore nothing is, that the whole thing is just a complete, like, it's just poof. Like, you can get to the point where truth itself just disappears. It's irrelevant.
Right, but to get back to the question, right? The question said, did Joseph Smith practice witchcraft? And the answer, I would say, is that he did not practice witchcraft. And the reason why is that he was not invoking evil spirits to do that which was wrong or bad or evil. He was not attempting to use the power of an unseen world to cause harm or to cause negative consequences for those who were following him. In fact, he claimed that he used the gifts and power of God, which is also an unseen power, to accomplish that which he has been commanded to do. So I would claim that he did not do witchcraft. Also, you can also claim he didn't do witchcraft because the rituals associated with standard witchcraft were not a part of his practice.
Okay. And I can get with you on that. Like, for people who really know a lot about witchcraft, and like I said, my point here isn't to like give you a lesson on witchcraft, but a lot of his practices were different than those who were actually practicing like legit witchcraft. Yeah. And I also agree in this case that like the unseen force that he was attempting to invoke would be Jesus Christ, yeah, right? And God the Father, in which case, like, it's not really, like, if you're reaching out to God, you're not really practicing witchcraft, because witchcraft reaches out to other divine sources, like, you know, even angels or devils. Like, it's other powers other than God. But I still think I'm like, this may be for another episode, but I have, like, still slight issue with what you were saying about that our perspective determines whether he was practicing witchcraft in reality or not, because I don't agree with that. I don't know if that's what you're saying.
No, I'm saying that some people will think that he is because of their perspective, but if you look at the actual details of what he did, he clearly was not. And
right. So you're not saying that he is or isn't depending on your perspective.
No, not at all.
Okay,
but
great.
Their perspective is such that they think that he was, but that's because they haven't delved into what he was actually doing. And
or they don't know enough about actual witchcraft in order to even determine whether he was or wasn't. In which case, we go back to our conversation in episode 1 about the difference between a crisis of knowledge and a crisis of faith.
Exactly.
Right? Because if you don't even have the knowledge about witchcraft enough to say what is and what isn't witchcraft, then how can you determine whether Joseph Smith was practicing witchcraft?
Yep.
And I feel like for the most part, most people are doing that. Most people don't know, like, the in-depth, like, processes and philosophies of witchcraft. And so it's like, especially when I hear Christians claiming that Joseph Smith was participating in witchcraft, like, just like non-denominational Christians or Christians of other denominations, I feel like sometimes they don't actually know anything about witchcraft, and they're just assuming because they don't understand how Joseph Smith could be called of God to do this work.
And I've been asked sometimes before, why in the world would you ever study that, Theron?
Because it's weird.
And the answer is because of what you just said.
Because if you don't know what witchcraft is, how can you determine whether Joseph Smith was practicing it or not?
Yeah, and how can you demonstrate whether he was or was not if you don't even know what it is? Trust me,
and you wanted to know.
And he didn't do it.
So did you study witchcraft to determine whether Joseph Smith was practicing it or not?
That was one of the goals, yes.
Interesting. You learn something new about my father every day.
But not the only goal. I want to know my enemy. I follow the art of Sun Tzu and the art of war, where he says, if you know your enemy and you know yourself, then you will not lose. But if you don't know the enemy, and when I say enemy, I mean...
I'm like, this is when you get so intense. I'm like,
I really like that.
Sometimes my dad gets a little intense when
it's called The Art of War. It's really a great book for anyone who wants to read it. But anyway, it's a good book, so I follow that practice.
Anyway, we've come back to this question. I feel like we've heard your answer. Joseph Smith probably did not practice witchcraft according to your understanding of witchcraft. In this case, I would agree. There are some things that I feel like I was a little not so sure about. But as far as whether Joseph Smith actually practiced witchcraft or not, I feel like I know enough to say that he didn't.
No.
And I also think we did bring up some really interesting things today about ways that we can seek for revelation, and like ways that are still within the sphere of light and truth that we can seek for revelation that are not often talked about, especially in like modern Latter-day Saint terms, but that are part of our doctrine. So,
and one other thing to think about is just the idea that revelation is an important principle, because one of the questions that was brought up in this episode that's a really important one is, how do you know what's true? How do you know what is good? How do you know what's right? And I claim that personal revelation is one of the better ways. And it's not just a happy thought. It isn't just a happy thought. It's not a good feeling. It's when knowledge is placed within your mind that wasn't there before. It's not just a happy thought.
So we'll have to talk more about Revelation, because I think it's a really interesting topic, and it is so important for, like, seeking truth and figuring out ways to know what's actually true, which is at the core of, I think, of a faith crisis or a search for truth in general. I think every person, literally, like, of any discipline on earth, is seeking truth in some capacity. Like, that's part of what we're here to do. And so, like, finding ways and knowing more about ways that you can seek for truth, I think, is really useful when you're someone like me, who's still figuring it out and doesn't really know all the time what I believe and doesn't feel certain about most things, right? I feel like I have some strong beliefs, but I don't always know exactly what is fully true. I also think, just really quick, it's like a plug for a previous episode, but we talked a little bit about ways that we're not living in alignment with our full revealed truths. We said doctrine, but in this case, I'm going to say truths, because I feel like this is another example of, like, we have, obviously, in our history, examples of divine revelatory tools being used by average, everyday people to seek revelation. And yet, like, that's, like, I could tell you, like, President Nelson, President Oaks, they're not out there telling us to, like, go find our own seer stones, you know? So, like, this is yet another example of, like, maybe a little bit of picking and choosing and mismatch. And yet, yeah, so mini plug, if you're curious about that topic, listen to that episode. I think we're gonna end off here. Do you have any other further thoughts?
No, it's been
Dad? Great! Okay, well, thank you so much for listening, of course. As usual, we want to hear what your thoughts are on this episode. We want to know, like, what you guys think. Was Joseph Smith practicing witchcraft? If you have different opinions, we want to hear it. You can email us at ldsfaithincrisis@gmail.com. Please follow us on Instagram, subscribe to YouTube, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.